Okay, we're good. We're here. We're in Bees Naz. How's it going, fuckterias? All right. Oh, being in time. My. All right, we're gonna keep running through this. I'm really excited. For those of you who just got on board with my channel, probably because you saw my Untermeyer Park video that I uploaded the other day, welcome, thank you. You have helped me crack the 300 mark. I am now over 300 subs. I remember the last time I was over 300 subs when I was a wee shit poster on YouTube. Mostly talking shit about the government. And we could all talk shit about the government right now. We'll see what organically flows out of this trap as we're getting into high philosophical metaphysics. So, I believe we left off at chapter 75, because this is where the computer page was stopped at. So, funny enough, I kind of need to go take a peek back real quick and look at my old feed. Just to double check what video it was. 37. Oh, okay. I screwed it up. All right. I hate it when I do that. But anyway, here's 36. Oop, put that on pause. And then let's go back to the end over here. Where am I? What's the last page? Oh, that's not it. Hold on, I'm getting my marker. 75. Right. Yes. Okay. All right. Yep, we're here. We're good. We're exactly where we need to be. All right. That was a waste of nobody's time. Let's see. Anyway, and tonight I am playing a la carte from Nuclear Power Trio. I'm in that kind of a mood. It's instrumental, so and you're not seeing the music video, so that kind of neutralizes the polarity of that band, which has been on point on the vibe check from day one of just, it's kind of like that band is like my happy place. It's like, here's my delusion of America is Nuclear Power Trio. This is how I wake up, and I don't have that existential dread that Jormungandr is going to swallow my head today. Okay? Because everybody is panicking because Yormy's in a bad fucking mood. Oh, man. Our world is filled with all sorts of interesting pressures. You should listen to Manly P. Hall. Manly P. Hall has a lot of lectures where he talks about stress. He's basically talking about stress, but stress is a certain mindset of being under pressure, right? So he doesn't use the word stress. It's an improper vernacular because then you are putting stress on you. However, there is pressure. You're acknowledging a feeling, something that is moving upon you. Anyway, let me see here. I want to make sure I'm in the right chat room. I don't think I'm in the right chat room. I'm seeing this because I see Saniko. What's good up? What's good, Saniko? Hold on a second. You're a little bit cut off on my screen here. I'm getting used to Streamlabs actually showing me the chat room. All right. I shouldn't need... All right. Whatever. I can just read. Okay, so I can't type in chat, but I'm reading it and I can respond in real time. Just because my window is a mess, and I gotta read a thing, I gotta monitor all sorts of stuff, and I don't have enough room to double screen my setup right now. Oh, this needs to be over here. Right there. All right, we're square. Dasein's historicality and world history. Proximally, and for the most part, Dasein understands itself in terms of that which it encounters in the environment and that with which it is circumspectively concerned. This understanding is not just a bare taking cognizance of itself, such as accompanies all Dasein's ways of behaving. Understanding signifies one's projecting oneself upon one's current possibility of being in the world. That is to say, it signifies existing as this possibility. Thus, understanding a common sense constitutes even the inauthentic existence of the they. When we are with one another in public, over our everyday concern does not encounter just equipment and work. It likewise encounters what is given along with these affairs, undertakings, incidents, mishaps. I love these characterizations of just like an event arises. This is the nature of the event in relationship to my experience. Yeah, that makes sense. That's understandable, right? Because like you guys over there, Saniko, you are, you're everything of your interests is abhorrent to those guys, because you're part of those based Canadian guys, the guys that protect the free speech of the studying and having an in-depth understanding of Mean Mr. Mustache and that particularly dark period of history in Europe. That is the height of the propagation of bullshit that they don't want the public to understand but need to control you with. Right? So I don't blame you, because YouTube doesn't offer too much to you in that respect, and you had to go where all your stuff was going. Me, I'm on a different kind of mission. I'm really fucking glad you're back. Really glad you're back. I'm so glad that you're back. Hold on a minute. Where am I? There we are. Aha. There. I'm going to make you a managing moderator. That's how much I miss you. Welcome back, sir. The world belongs to everyday trade and traffic as the soil from which they grow and the arena where they are displayed. And also, like I think you may have noticed, like this is a new channel, right? Zerilath, the channel Zerilath was deleted by YouTube. I took it way too far with something I did. I got a third strike when the strike system like mattered. Like it was towards the end. It was like what's really fucking funny is that like it seems like the shit's always over after me, right? Like they get me in the end, and then it's the end of that fucking psyop anyway, and I have to come back afterwards. I think this is why Thor's got my back, because I'm really good at this. So come on, I'm starting to grow an immunity to the snake's venom over here. What's that? Kinda. I'm more adjacent to them due to my Alberta separation goals. I'm glad I found which is kind of funny. Yeah, I figured that was the case for the arc of your life. Right. Yeah. And at the end of the day, it's just like the way they treated me was so high school, juvenile, immature, because of whatever their club meant to them, and I was just I was embarrassed and besides myself. It put me in a lot of rage. Plus, I really fucking hated the humanitarian level reason, behind it, right? It's just something that, like, 99% of the time, Americans don't treat each other like that when their political differences are like that, right? So, so it made me think a lot about what's going on in Canadian conservative culture with the youth, and how much I resonated with that, which is why I would rather cut contact instead of rationalizing it. It's the same reason why there's a lot of friends that I've cut off in the last couple of months, because, I don't think my values are really their values, and I don't think that they get it, and I don't think that they respect me. So I'm just not interested anymore, right? As Mungold? I don't know nothing about that. Wait, let me get back on this thing, because this isn't the let me have a chit-chat with the chat room. But because it's just us right now. Anyway, when we are with one another in public, the others are encountered in activity of such kind that one is in the swim with it oneself. One is acquainted with it, discusses it, encourages it, combats it, retains it, and forgets it. But one always does so primarily with regards to what is getting done and what is going to come of it. Was herausbringt. We compute the progress which the individual Dasein has made, his stoppages, readjustments, and output, and we do so proximately in terms of that with which he is concerned. Its course, its status, its changes, its availability, no matter how trivial it may be to allude to the way in which Dasein is understood in everyday common sense, ontologically, this understanding is by no means transparent. But in that case, why should not Dasein's connectedness be defined in terms of what it is concerned with and what it experiences? Do not equipment and work and everything which Dasein dwells alongside belong to history too? If not, is the historizing of history just the isolated running off of streams of experience in individual subjects? Huh. Yeah. Well, there you go, right? It's like, as time passes, and you do not adjust with the times, you turn into a mockery of yourself. It falls, it falls out of style. Is really the worst kind of word to describe what I'm really trying to get at, right? It's because it's like looking at people that are, like we're getting pretty close to, like, the extreme wokeism of things kind of going away, right? But when it really is basically gone away, like, you'll still see, like, groups of people that stick to it, right? General society's moved on to it, but then you got these large quarters that have made their own subculture based on all of that, right? And then it's a question of how long it cares to continue to pretend it's a very important thing to be a part of their identity, right? Like, what do they continue to agree with? And that all bears down on who's got the most charisma amongst that group, because then the hierarchy is going to make them the leader, and then it's based on the confidence they have in the leader's judgment. And if the leader says we wear masks, they're going to be all for it, right? And that's like a micro pocket of somebody being a dictator. Oh, yes. Oh, very much so. And what's beautiful is this book has been like an augury in and of itself. I have read chapters in most part order, and even when it was out of order, it turned out to like almost prove it was trying to time the information, right? So like every time I get into a fucking chapter, it happens to be appropriate to something that just happened. I haven't yet seen it be appropriate to something that's going to happen, but it does help me in ways where like it's like I'm pulling tarot cards, right? Right? So I'm reading this book intuitively right when my life event needs it. This book is like a guide for me in real time, which is making the book actually much more than a book. And I'm showing everybody that it's okay when you're using your rational faculties and to let a book do this to you. Because this is some good shit right here. This is some of the best shit I've read since Ayn Rand. All right? Hold on. Right. Okay. So let me take a swig and jump back into it. Indeed, history is neither the connectedness of motion in the alterations of subjects, nor a free-floating sequence of experiences which subjects have had. Does the historizing of history then pertain to the way subject and object are linked together, even if one assigns Zweist historizing to the subject-object relation? We then have to ask what kind of being belongs to this linkage as such. If this is what basically historizes the thesis of Dasein's historicality, does hold on a second, let me re-sentence. The thesis of Dasein's historicality does not say that the worldless subject is historical, but that what is historical is the entity that exists as being in the world. The historizing of history is the historizing of being in the world. Dasein's historicality is essentially the historicality of the world, which on the basis of existatico-horizontal temporality belongs to the temporalizing of the temporality. Insofar as Dasein exists factically, it already encounters that which has been discovered within the world. With the existence of historical being in the world, what is ready to hand and what is present at hand have already, in every case, been incorporated into the history of the world. Equipment and work, for instance, books have their fates. Just talking about fucking books. Anyway, buildings and institutions have their history. And even nature is historical. It is not historical, to be sure, insofar as we speak of natural history. But nature is historical as a countryside, as an area that has been colonized or exploited, as a battlefield, or as the site of a cult. These entities within the world are historical as such, and their history does not signify something external, which merely accompanies the inner history of the soul. We call such entities the world historical. Here, we must notice that the expression world history, which we have chosen and which is here understood ontologically, has a double signification. So here we're getting to our perception of history by the filter of the record. The expression signifies, for one thing, the historizing of the world in its essential existence, or existent unity with Dasein. At the same time, we have here in view the historizing within the world of what is ready to hand and present at hand, insofar as entities within the world are, in every case, discovered with the factically existent world. Now, by the way, we're talking about world, right? So it's history of the world, not history of the planet, not history of Earth, not history of mankind, not history of civilization, not the history of nature. No, it's the history of your perception of reality. It doesn't have to be the truth. It just has to be everything that you've confirmed. We are still working within confirmation. This isn't imagination, right? Like, history is so fucking thinly stretched as a fucking story that we are supposed to collectively fucking know. That we don't have any focus on any goddamn fucking details. So we're filling in a million blanks about what happened before and after the fucking Civil War, for instance. Right? We don't know what the fuck happened in the Civil fucking War, and we think we knew what fucking happened at the fall of Rome. We think we know what fucking happened at the fucking alleged crucifixion of Jesus Christ. We think we know what fucking happened at the flood. We don't know shit. We don't know fucking shit. There are people that actually do know, and you don't fucking listen to them. But I do. Not you, Sinico. I'm talking to anybody out there who's arrogant. All right. The historical world is factically only as the world of entities within the world. That which happens with equipment and work as such has its own character of movement, and this character has been completely obscure up till now, when, for instance, a ring gets handed over to someone and worn. This is a kind of being in which it does not simply suffer changes of location. The movement of historizing in which something happens to something is not to be grasped in terms of motion as change of location. This holds for all world historical processes and events, and even in a certain manner for natural catastrophes. Quite apart from the fact that if we were to follow up the problem of the ontological structure of world history, the ontological structure of world historical historizing, we would necessarily be transgressing the limits of our theme. We can refrain from this all the more because the very aim of this exposition is to lead us face to face with the ontological enigma of the movement of historizing in general. The movement of historizing in general, which, if I understand that sentence, which means what historizing means, it's basically how we are recording it in real time. Look at our agreement about history over the last 8 years. We need only delimit that phenomenal range which we necessarily must also have in view ontologically when we talk of Dasein's historicality. The transcendence of the world has a temporal foundation, and by reason of this, the world historical is, in every case, already objectively there in the historizing of existing, being in the world, without being grasped historiologically, and because factical Dasein in falling is absorbed in that with which it concerns itself. It understands its history world historically in the first instance. And because, further, the ordinary understanding of being understands being as presence at hand without further differentiation, the being of the world historical is experienced and interpreted in the sense of something present at hand which comes along, has presence, and then disappears. And finally, because the meaning of being in general is held to be something simply self-evident, the question about the kind of being of the world historical and about the movement of historizing in general has really just the barren circumstantiality of a verbal sophistry. Of course you remember my personality. That's why I'm here. No, that's why you're here. See, I'm such a fucking narcissist. I missed the annotation. So for wherever annotation 1 was up there, it's Zusammenholen. The older editions have Zusammenholen. Hey, Pearl. How you doing, love? All right. Everyday Dasein has been dispersed into the many kinds of things which daily come to pass. The opportunities and circumstances which concern keeps tactically awaiting in advance have fate as their outcome in terms of that with which inauthentically existing Dasein concerns itself. It first computes its history. In so doing, it is driven about by its affairs. So it is So if it wants to come to itself, it must first pull itself together. Oh, that's where it was. Pulling itself together. So pulling itself together is Zusammenholen, which can also be Zusammenholen as two different words. From the dispersion and disconnectedness of the very things that have come to pass, and because of this, it is only then that there at last arises from the horizon of the understanding, which belongs to the inauthentic historicality, the question of how one is to establish a connectedness of Dasein if one does so in the sense of experiences, of a subject, experiences which are also present at hand, the possibility that the horizon for the question should be the dominant one is grounded in the irresoluteness which goes to make up the essence of the self in constancy. We have thus pointed out the source of the question of the connectedness of Dasein in the sense of the unity with which experiences are linked together between birth and death. At the same time, the origin of this question betrays that it is an inappropriate one if we are aiming at a primordial existential interpretation of Dasein's totality of history. On the other hand, despite the predominance of this natural horizon for such questions, it becomes explicable why Dasein's authentic historicality, fate, and repetition looks as if it, least of all, could supply the phenomenal basis for bringing into the shape of an ontologically grounded problem what is at bottom intended in the question of the connectedness of life. This question does not ask how Dasein gains such a unity of connectedness that the sequence of experiences which has ensued and is still ensuing can subsequently be linked together. It asks rather in which of its own kinds of being Dasein loses itself in such a manner. Hold on. I'm going to go down here and whoops. Verliert es sich so. The older editions have verliert des sich nicht so. Interesting difference. Dasein loses itself in such manner that it must, as it were, only subsequently pull itself together out of its dispersal and think up for itself a unity in which that together is embraced. Our lostness in the they and in the world historical has earlier been revealed as a fleeing in the face of death. All right, we're going to get into a little bit of death again. Now, hold on one second. Just want to see how far down to the end. All right. All right. Should be able to marathon this. Such fleeing makes manifest that being towards death is a basic attribute of care. Anticipatory resoluteness brings this being towards death into authentic existence. The historizing of this resoluteness, however, is the repetition of the heritage of possibilities by handling these down to oneself and anticipation. And we have interpreted this historizing as authentic historicality is perhaps the whole of existence, stretched along in this historicality in a way which is primordial and not lost, and which has no need of connectedness. The self's resoluteness against the inconstancy of distraction is in itself a steadiness which has been stretched along the steadiness with which Dasein as fate incorporates into its existence birth and death and their between, and holds them as thus incorporated, so that in such constancy Dasein is indeed in a moment of vision for what is world historical in its current situation. Die Entschlossenheit des Selbst. Hold on. The noun. Okay, there is English in there. It's way down below. Okay, we're reading it. Selbst gegen die Unständigkeit der Zerstung ist in sich selbst die erstreckte Stadigkeit in der das Dasein als Schlüssel gebert und in ihr zwischen in sein Existenz in Besogen hält, so zwar, dass es ist solche Ständigkeit augenblicklich blicklich ist für das Welt geschichtlich seine jeweilige situation. The noun, hang on, Stetigkeit, which we here translate as steadiness, may mean either continuity or refractoriness. Heidegger may have both senses in mind. Okay, great. In the fateful repetition of possibilities that have been, Dasein brings itself back immediately, that is to say, in a way that is temporally ecstatical to what already has been before it. But when its heritage is thus handed down to itself, its birth is caught up into its existence in coming back from possibility of death, the possibility which is not to be outstripped, if only so that this existence may accept the thrownness of its own there in a way which is more free from illusion. Ooh. Hey, Violence is here too. What's up? Violence and Saniko, don't you two know each other? Let's see. Yes, okay. Here we go. Reading it. Mit diesem sich überlaufen des Erbes eber ist dann die Geburt ein Zurückkommen aus der unüberhörbaren Möglichkeit des Todes in das Existenz eingehüllt, damit dies völlig nur die Geworfenheit das eigenen der Illusion hinnehmen. Okay, here, as in these passages and perhaps these passages, Heidegger seems to be exploiting the double meaning of einhüllen as to bring in and to catch up with. Dasein brings its birth into its existence by accepting its heritage of possibilities, and in this way it catches up with it. Thus, while death cannot be outstripped, überhüllt, birth can at least be caught up with, eingehüllt. Excuse me. Woo! Resoluteness constitutes... You know what? We're going to be here for a hot minute. I'm going to take my half-hour break. I listen to lots of Rammstein. All right, my trainer has to play one Rammstein song every time we freaking work out. At least one Rammstein song. Neither of us are super fond to most of the new stuff. I love the album that came out with Ausländer and all that stuff. But anyway, let's see here. Let me pick the next song from this ridiculous band that I love. Let's see. What am I going to grab? I'm making rando choices. No. Give me an album. All right, we're doing this one. Hold on, there's going to be an ad. Yeah, it is here with the ads. All right. Okay. I don't want to push it with copyright nonsense, because I want to have this be like a semi-watchable show after the fact. I've got a handful of these videos that um, people in certain countries can't watch because of whichever random freaking metal band had to have a stick up their ass. um, and I'm trying out the fair use notice thing in the description now, right? So, anyway. Resoluteness. Let's get through the rest of this chapter. Reflect on the chapter and then start the next chapter. Resoluteness constitutes the loyalty of existence to its own self. As resoluteness, which is ready for anxiety, this loyalty is at the same time a possible way of revering the sole authority which a free existing can have of reversing the repeatable possibilities of existence. Resoluteness would be misunderstood ontologically if one were to suppose that it would be actual as experience only as long as the act of resolving lasts. In resoluteness lies the existential constancy, which by its very essence has already anticipated Vorwegen Omen, every possible moment of vision that may arise from it. As fate, resoluteness is freedom to give up some definite resolution, and to give it up in accordance with the demands of some possible situation or other. The steadiness of existence is not interrupted thereby, but confirmed in the moment of vision. This steadiness is not first formed either through or by the adjoining of moments one to another, but these arise from the temporality of that repetition which is futurely in the process of having been, a temporality which has already been stretched along. In inauthentic history, or historicality, on the other hand, the way in which fate has been primordially stretched along has been hidden, with the inconstancy of the they-self-Dasein makes present its today. In awaiting the next new thing, it has already forgotten the old one. The they evades choice. Oh my gosh. Are you picking up what he's putting down right here? Are you feeling this, the subtext of what he's fucking saying? This is goddamn brilliant. Because I have intuited this pattern, right? It's the pattern that it's what we understand. It's the goldfish memory problem, right? It's like what's missing in history is a real fucking sense, a real big scope of what people's lives were like in a certain way, right? Everybody who is participating in the internet is allowing the world to witness some of your life, right? If you're doing YouTube the way I'm doing YouTube, where it's like, I don't got money for a fucking studio. I don't got money for a fucking backdrop right now. You're going to have to see aspects of how I fucking live. You're going to have to see me, not my product. You're going to have to see me. I'm the product, right? Other times in history, I mean, you were illiterate. You couldn't have published a book. You couldn't have published a magazine for you. You couldn't have published a poem for yourself, whatever. You didn't know how to write, right? Everybody's got enough literacy to make a mark with their mind in the world and lean on it, especially by building your social credit, which you can have social credit in the sense of just the people you surround yourself by versus the social credit of stepping out amongst the general public where everything is more business than friendly, right? Here, it's like I have a particular relationship with my chat group, right? With you guys, where it's a bit intimate, but at the same time, it's still no more connected than just somebody who I have not had conversation with at all that, chimes in to say a thing or two, but I don't really know much about them, right? Here, there's a back and forth. You actually, like, I share something about my life, you share something about your life, because of how it adds the value to the subject matter here, right? And not everybody should be doing this, but I think that this is one way to read a fucking book to the public. Welcome to, welcome to Higher Force Reading Hour. Where was I? The today understands the past in terms of the present. On the other hand, oh wait, no, that's not right. Where was it? Where was the end of the at hand? Lost in the making present of the today, it understands the past in terms of the present. On the other hand, the temporality of authentic historicality as the moment of vision of anticipatory repetition deprives the today of its character as present. All right, I don't have to read the next annotations. And weans one from the conventionalities of the they. When, however, one's existence is inauthentically historical, it is loaded down with the legacy of a past which has become unrecognizable, and it seeks the modern. But when historicality is authentic, it understands history as the recurrence of the possibility and knows that a possibility will recur only if existence is open for it fatefully in a moment of vision in resolute repetition. Right? So, in short, it's not going to be able to pick up in history what really mattered in the story of the world, of the day-to-day affairs, unless it was a day-to-day affair that was repeated, and repeated by everybody. Then you understood what trends. He's talking about trend, right? Trends that get remembered because there was a lot of things published about the trend, and the trend was more important than the people. The people were just kind of like a body that was the object or subject, the object of the trend. The trend is the subject, if that makes sense to you. Okay. Existential interpretation of Dasein's historicality is constantly getting eclipsed unawares. The obscurities are all the harder to dispel when we have not disentangled the possible dimensions of the appropriate inquiry, and when everything is haunted by the enigma of being, and as has now been made plain, by that of motion. Nevertheless, we may venture a projection of the ontological genesis of historiology as a science in terms of Dasein's historicality. This projection will serve to prepare us for the clarification of the task of destroying the history of philosophy historiologically, a clarification which is to be accomplished in what follows. Hold on a second. What did he just say? This projection will serve to prepare us for the clarification of the task of destroying the history of philosophy historiologically. A clarification which is to be accomplished in what follows. Wow, what the heck is he about to talk about, right? Because if he wants to talk about, in his time, destroying the history of philosophy, he's probably going to go back to to pre-Socratic, but the line leading to Socratic, and making a point about that, right? Like, in short, he's about to bring in context, I believe. Right? On the delay. On the delay, violence is probably agreeing with me in real time. Exactly. I had to double take that, as you can see, myself, just to make sure I understood what he was saying. You know, it's one thing to read. It's one thing to read something. It's another thing to be comprehending what you have read. All right. Let me get a look here at the length of 76. I want to get an idea of how far I want to go before I take the next break. All right. Yeah, okay, so I'm going to read about half of this and then we're going to take a break. Okay. The existential source of historiology in Dasein's historicality. We need not discuss the fact that historiology, like any science, is as a kind of being of Dasein factically dependent at any time on the prevailing worldview. Beyond this, we must inquire into the ontological possibility of how the sciences have their source in Dasein's state of being. This source is still not very transparent. In the context which lies before us, our analysis will acquaint us in outline with the existential source of historiology, only to the extent of bringing still more plainly to light the historicality of Dasein and the fact that this historicality is rooted in temporality. If Dasein's being is in principle historical, then every factical science is always manifestly in the grip of this historizing. But historiology still has Dasein's historicality as its presupposition, in its own quite special way. This can be made plain in the first instance by the suggestion that historiology, as the science of Dasein's history, must presuppose as its possible object the entity which is primordially historical. But history must not only be in order that a historiological object may become accessible and historiological. Cognition is not only historical as a historizing way in which Dasein comports itself. Whether the historiological disclosure of history is factically accomplished or not, its ontological structure is such that in itself this discourse has its roots in the historicality of Dasein. This is the connection we have in view when we talk of Dasein's historicality as the existential source of historiology. To cast light upon this connection signifies methodology that the idea of historiology must be projected ontologically in terms of Dasein's historicality. The issue here is not one of abstracting the concept of historiology, but the way something is factically done in the sciences today, nor is it one of assimilating it to anything of this sort. By the way, as much as it was kind of like technically a shocking statement with what he said he was going to do with destroying the history of philosophy effectively, I mean, if you know, once you are figuring out your etymology, you're going to inherently do that. The consensus philosophy of the West in its predomination, right, with the Socratic stuff and everything else, right, is based on some presuppositions of how we gathered that information in the first place to base the philosophy upon, right? So we're getting into epistemology, right? And so, being in time is epistemology, right? This is an epistemology, which is why it partners so well with objectivism. For what guarantee do we have in principle that such a factical procedure will indeed be properly representative of historiology in its primordial and authentic possibilities. And even if this should turn out to be the case, we shall hold back from any decision about this. Then the concept could be discovered in the fact only by using the clue provided by the idea of historiology as one which we have already understood. On the other hand, the existential idea of historiology is not given a higher justification by having the historian affirm that his factical behavior is in agreement with it, nor does the idea become false if he disputes any such agreement. The idea of historiology as a science implies that the disclosure of historical entities is what it has seized upon as its own task. Every science is constituted primarily by thematizing that which is familiar pre-scientifically in Dasein as disclosed being in the world, gets projected upon the being which is specific to it. With this projection, the realm of entities is bounded off. The ways of access to them get managed methodologically, and the conceptual structure for interpreting them is outlined. If we may postpone the question of whether a history of the present is possible and assign Zivissen to historiology, the task of disclosing the past, then the historiological thematizing of history is possible, only if, in general, the past has, in each case, already been disclosed. Quite apart from the question of whether sufficient sources are available for the historiological envisagement of the past, the way to it must, in general, be open if we are to go back to it historiologically. It is by no means patent that anything of the sort is the case or how this is possible. But insofar as Dasein's being is historical, that is to say, insofar as by reason of it horizontal temporality. Whew. Ecstatico. Okay. I think I've even read this word before, but I think the context helped me at the time. Here, the context isn't helping me one iota. Hang on. Let's see. It's giving me a lot of Spanish, so it must be Latin. It's probably in Latin. Ecstatico. Give me Latin. Not, ugh. Okay. So it means ecstatic. Okay, so it's ecstatic. So the ecstatico horizontal temporality. I had to be sure. I know it's as stupid as it comes, but I couldn't think of the definition of ecstatic in my head at the time. Ecstatico horizontal temporality, it is open in its character of having been. The way is, in general, prepared for such thematizing of the past as can be accomplished in existence. And because Dasein, and only Dasein, is primordially historical, that which historiological thematizing presents as a possible object for research must have the kind of being of Dasein which has been there. Along with any factical Dasein as being in the world, there is also in each case world history. If Dasein is there no longer, then the world too is something that has been there. This is not in conflict with the fact that, all the same, what was formerly ready to hand within the world does not yet pass away, but becomes something that one can, in a present, come across historiologically as something which has not passed away and which belongs to the world that has been there. Remains, monuments, and records that are still present at hand are possible material for the concrete disclosure of the Dasein which has been there. Such things can turn into historiological material only because in accordance with their own kind of being. They have a world historical character, and they become such material only when they have been understood in advance with regard to their within the worldness. Right. People talk about the ritual nature of having the Battle of Gettysburg reenactment, and the Battle of Gettysburg reenactment is sympathetic magic, right? It turns the participants into a part of the memorial, into a part of the monument, right? And it shapes our way of seeing it. We're meant to see it a certain way, and it's meant to reinforce a characterization of people in the war. He's getting to the essence of propaganda here. The world that has already been projected is given a definite character by way of an interpretation of the world historical material we have received. Just don't fucking let Goebbels know you wrote this fucking sentence. Right here, he's threatening Goebbels. This is threatening Goebbels if ever I saw it in real time, knowing when this book was published. Our going back to the past does not first get its start from the acquisition, sifting, and securing of such material. These activities presuppose historical being towards, the Dasein that has been there. That is to say, they presuppose the historicality of the historian's existence. This is the existential foundation for historiology as a science, even for its most trivial and mechanical procedures. If historiology is rooted in historicality in this manner, then it is from here that we must determine what the object of historiology really is. The delimitation of the primordial theme of historiology will have to be carried through in conformity with the character of authentic historicality and its disclosure of what has been there. That is to say, in conformity with repetition, as is disclosure in repetition. The Dasein which has been there is understood in its authentic possibility which has been. The birth of historiology and authentic historicality, therefore, signifies that in taking as our primary theme the historiological object we are projecting, the Dasein which has been there upon its own most possibility of existence, is historiology. Thus, to have the possible for its theme does not its whole meaning point solely to the facts, to how something has factually been. Okay, I'm going to take the next break here at this juncture, which will give us 1, 2, 3. Yeah, perfect. And then it'll be 3 pages on the other side of this. And then after that, I'll make a determination if I want to read another chapter, depending on how long it is, basically. All right, what do I want? What do I want? Let's see. I'm going to need to pick another song for these guys. Oh, yes. This one would be absolutely perfect.
With so many choices on...
Hush You. Almost there. Okay. Bang. And... Ooh, let's kill that. And let's enjoy ourselves. Hey, okay, we're back. This band is ridiculous. But anyway, boom. Okay, let's keep it rolling. Sorry. What does it signify to say that Dasein is factual? If Dasein is really actual only in existence, then its factuality is constituted precisely by its resolute projection of itself upon a chosen potentiality for being. But if so, that which authentically has been there factually is the existential possibility in which fate, destiny, and world history have been factically determined. Because in each case existence is only a factically thrown historiology will disclose the quiet force of the possible with the greater penetration of the more simply and the more concretely having been in the world is understood in terms of its possibility and only presented as such. If historiology, which itself arises from authentic historicality, reveals by repetition the Dasein which has been there and reveals it in its possibility, then historiology has already made manifest the universal in the once for all. The question of whether the object of historiology is just to put once for all individuals, events, into a series of whether it also has laws as its objects is one that is radically mistaken. The theme of historiology is neither that which has happened just once for all, nor something universal that floats above it, but the possibility which has been factically existent. Okay, hold on. Okay, don't have to read it. This possibility does not get repeated as such, that is to say, understood in an authentically historical way if it becomes perverted into the colorlessness of a supratemporal model. Only by historicality, which is factical and authentic, can the history of what has been there as a resolute fate be disclosed in such a manner that in repetition the force of the possible gets struck home into one's factical existence. In other words, that it comes towards that existence in its futural character. The historicality of unhistorological Dasein does not take its departure from the present and from what is actual only today in order to grope its way back from there to something that is past, and neither does historiology, even historiological disclosure, temporalize itself in terms of the future. The selection of what is to become a possible object for historiology has already been met with in the factical existential choice of Dasein's historicality, in which historiology first of all arises and in which alone it is. The historiological disclosure of the past is based on fateful repetition and is so far from subjective that it alone guarantees the objectivity of historiology. For the objective of science is regulated primarily in terms of whether that science can confront us with the entity which belongs to it as its theme and can bring it uncovered in the primordiality of its being to our understanding. In no science are the universal validity of standards and the claims to universality which the they and its common sense demand less possible as criteria of truth than in authentic historiology. Only because in each case the center theme of historiology is the possibility of existence which has been there, and because the latter exists factically in a way which is world historical, can it demand of itself that it takes its orientation inexorably from the fact. Accordingly, this research, a factical, has many branches and takes for its object the history of equipment, of work, of culture, of the spirit, and of ideas, as handing itself down, history is, in itself, at the same time, and in each case, always in an interpretedness which belongs to it, and which has a history of its own. So, for the most part, it is only through traditional history that historiology penetrates to what has been there itself. This is why concrete historiological research can, in each case, maintain itself in varying closeness to its authentic theme. If the historian throws himself straightway into the worldview of an era he has not thus proved as yet that he understands, his object in an authentically historical way, and not just aesthetically, and on the other hand, the existence of a historian who only at its sources may be characterized by historicality which is authentic. Thus, the very prevalence of a differentiated interest, even in the most remote and primitive cultures, is in itself no proof of the authentic historicality of a time. In the end, the emergence of a problem of historicism is the clearest symptom that historiology endeavors to alienate Dasein from its authentic historicality. Such historicality does not necessarily require historiology. It is not the case that unhistoriological eras as such are unhistorical also. Entity to which science belongs. Yes. Okay. The possibility that historiology in general can either be used for one's life or abused in it is grounded on the fact that one's life is historical in the roots of its being, and that therefore, as factically existing, one has in each case made one's decision for authentic and inauthentic historicality. Nietzsche recognized what was essential as to the use and abuse of historiology for life in the second of his studies, Out of Season, and said it unequivocally and penetratingly. He distinguished three kinds of historiology: the monumental, the antiquarian, and the critical, without explicitly pointing out the necessity of this triad or the ground of its unity. The threefold character of historiology is adumbrated in the historicality of Dasein. Adumbrate? Okay, here's a word. I've never heard this word ever in my life. This is a new word. All right. How useful is this word in my life? All right. To give a sketchy outline of, to prefigure indistinctively or foreshadow, to disclose partially or guardedly, to so adumbrate. Interesting. I don't know if I'm going to remember that word, but that'll be interesting if I remember it and can use it. So, adumbrated. Okay. Character of history is adumbrated in the historicality of Dasein. Right? So, what does that mean? It's talking about your memory fucking recall, or how you getting all this information about history will have a certain limitation on how you imagine it in your head. Thus, my hallucination of the Civil War, your hallucination of the Civil War. At the same time, this historicality enables us to understand to what extent these three possibilities must be united factically and concretely in any historiology which is authentic. Nietzsche's division is not accidental. The beginning of his study allows us to suppose that he understood more than he has made known to us. As historical, Dasein is possible only by reason of its temporality, and temporality temporalizes itself in the ecstatico-horizontal unity of its raptures. Dasein exists authentically as futural in resolutely disclosing a possibility which it has chosen. coming back resolutely to itself, it is, by repetition, open for the monumental possibility of human existence. The historiology which arises from such historicality is monumental, as in the process of having been. Dasein has been delivered over to its thrownness, when the possible is made one's own by repetition. There is adumbrated at the same time the possibility of reverently preserving the existence that has been there, in which the possibility seized upon has become manifest. This authentic historiology, as monumental, is antiquarian too. Dasein temporalizes itself in the way the future and having been are united in the present. The present discloses the today authentically, and of course as the moment of vision, but insofar as this today has been interpreted in terms of understanding a possibility of existence which has been seized upon, an understanding which is repetitive in a futural manner, authentic historiology becomes a way in which the today gets deprived of its character as present. In other words, it becomes a way of painfully detaching oneself from the falling publicness of the today. As authentic, the historiology, which is both monumental and antiquarian, is necessarily a critique of the present. Authentic historicality is the foundation for the possibility of uniting these three ways of historiology, but the ground on which authentic historiology is founded is temporality as the existential meaning of the being of care. All right. Violence is mentioning Nietzsche. The existential historical source of historiology may be presented concretely by analyzing the thematization which is constitutive for this science. Right, the thematization. I noticed this growing up as a kid in listening to the history. History class was always framed in terms of how much slavery there was in civilization, how much technology there was in civilization, how much women's rights there were in civilization, right? Maybe how much drug use there may have been, and if that's even a truth of what they say about what drug use was. These people have no fucking idea. Right? The history that we're told is just kind of like generality of civilization, and then palace intrigue and a little bit of drama that we know about, like kings and the members of their court, or presidents and their cabinets, etc., etc., etc. And everything else is kind of left for you to explore on your own, but they leave everything up to your imagination, and there's a whole lot to say, and you have to ask yourself, are they being forthright with you in seeing everything? I think you get what I'm trying to say. I don't want to go incomprehensible over here. In historiological thematization, the main point is the cultivation of the hermeneutical situation, which once the historically existent Dasein has made its resolution, opens itself to the repetitive disclosure of what has been there. The possibility and the structure of historiological truth are to be expounded in terms of authentic disclosedness of historical existence. But since the basic concepts of the historiological sciences, whether they pertain to the objects of these sciences or to the way in which these are treated, are concepts of existence, the theory of the humane science presupposes an existential interpretation which has as its theme the historicality of Dasein. Such an interpretation is the constant goal to which the researchers of Wilhelm Dilthey seek to bring us closer, and which gets illumined in a more penetrating fashion by the ideas of Count Jörg von Wartenberg. Okay. So those are a few figures to keep in mind. So let me take a look here and get a sense of how long 77 is. Because I'm either going to, let me see, it's 10:30. I probably want to do another chapter. Do I want to do all this? Yes, I do. Yeah. Okay, we're going to take one more break. This might be 2 more breaks. Okay, so we're going to be here for another half an hour to an hour, probably an hour, the way that looks. But that's good with me because then we're getting to the end of a section, and that's going to be swell. This section was pretty short, right? Look at this. So go down to here, right? Within timeness as the source of the ordinary conception of time. Okay. Yeah, no, just making sure I'm not crazy. Okay. So this was because this was also, we just recently jumped into a section. This section was very short. Okay. Now, which one do I want to grab here? All right. We're going to do Apocalypse Now. Come on. There we go. Alright. Woo! Let's keep rolling. Let's keep rolling over here. How's the chat group? I saw Pearl had popped up saying she's enjoying it, and Violence is fascinated. Thank you so much, guys. Haha. Alrighty. What did you do? What kind of tea do you get? The shoot. What's that? What's that tea that's amazing for dreams? Shoot. It's this weed. It's growing in my backyard, and I think it's got weed in its name too. It's like not milkweed. There's a particular kind of weed that grows like everywhere, and like if you burn it or you eat, you drink it or whatever, it does something for your dream state. But anyway, or was it am I thinking of mugwort? Might be mugwort. But anyway, 77. The connection of the foregoing exposition of the problem of historicality with the researchers of Wilhelm Dilthey and the ideas of Count York. Hold on. So in this section, we have relaxed some of our usual conventions in view of the special stylistic character of the quotations from Count York and Heidegger's own minor inconsistencies in punctuation. In particular, we shall now translate history as history, with a capital H rather than a historiology. Break it down. Okay, so the connection of the foregoing exposition of the problem of historicality with the researches of Wilhelm Dilthey and the ideas of Count York. So what he is saying is that these two, he's building, I believe it sounds like he's building a conversation off of things that they wrote about the problem of history. The analysis of the problem of history, which we have just carried through, has arisen in the process of appropriating the labors of Dilthey. It has been corroborated and at the same time strengthened by these of Count York, which are found scattered through his letters to him. The image of Dilthey, which is still widely disseminated today, is that of the sensitive interpreter of the history of the spirit, especially the history of literature, who also endeavors to distinguish between the natural and the humane sciences, thereby assigning Zweist a distinctive role to the history of the latter group and likewise to psychology, then allowing the whole to merge together in a relativistic philosophy of life. Considered superficially, this stretch is correct, but the substance eludes it, and it covers up more than it reveals. We may divide... Yeah, exactly. That's what it said. Okay, so we may divide Dilthey's research schematically into three domains. Studies on the theory of the humane sciences and the distinctions between these and the natural sciences. Researches into the history of the sciences of man, society, and the state, endeavors towards a psychology in which the whole fact of man is to be presented, investigations in the theory of science, in historical science, and in psychological hermeneutics are constantly permeating and intersecting each other, where any one point of view predominates the other are the motives and the means. What looks likely disunity and an unsure, haphazard way of trying things out is an elemental restlessness, the one goal of which is to understand life philosophically and to ensure for this understanding a hermeneutical foundation in terms of life itself. Everything centers in psychology, in which life is to be understood in the historical context of its development and its effect, and understood as the way in which man, as the possible object of the humane sciences, and especially as the root of these sciences, is hermeneutics. Sciences is. Hermeneutics is the way this understanding enlightens itself. It is also the methodology of historiology, though only in derivative form. In the contemporaneous discussions, Dilthey's own researches for laying the basis for the humane sciences were forced one-sidedly into the field of the theory of science. And it was, of course, with a regard for such discussions that his publications were often oriented in this direction. But the logic of the humane sciences was by no means central for him, no more than he was striving in his psychology merely to make improvement in the positive science of the psychical. Now, by the way, because, like I said earlier, we may see the possibility of him breaking down Socrates later on. There's still we're less than 100 pages from being done with the body of this work. So that's still a lot to go. Things that make things important is a lot of people didn't know that Socrates was a slave. I just recently was told that Socrates was a slave. I mean, I didn't know what he was. I didn't think he was a slave, though. I would have figured that that point would have mattered, right? So, what I don't know yet is exactly what was the situation of his owner, right? And also, by that merit, the idea of what was a slave's rights. This slave was allowed to talk a lot. Right, exactly. But Plato also was definitely a man of stature when he wasn't a slave. The man who wrote the Republic and all these things, right? Slavery means something different. Dilthey's friend, Count York, gives unambiguous expression to Dilthey's own most philosophical tendency in the communications between them, when he alludes to our common interest in understanding historicality, italicized by the author. Dilthey's research are only now becoming accessible in their full scope. If we are to make them our own, we need the steadiness and concreteness of coming to terms with them in principle. This is not the place, Ort, for discussion in details the problem which moved him or how he was moved by them. We shall, however, describe in a provisional way some of Count York's central ideas by selecting characteristic passages from the letters. In these communications, York's... I hope I wasn't too far away from the microphone there. Sorry, I was trying to be comfortable in a different position for a minute. This not the place, or for discussing in details the problems which had moved him or how he was moved by them. We shall, however, describe in a provisional way... okay, I read the whole thing, sorry. In these communications, York's own tendency is brought to life by the labors of Dilthey and his ways of formulating questions, and it shows itself when York takes his stand as to the tasks of the discipline, which is to lay the basis analytical psychology. Of Dilthey's Academy paper, Ideen über ein Beschrieben und Gliederende Psychology, 1894, he writes, it gets firmly laid down with the consideration of the self is the primary means for knowing, and that the primary procedure of knowing is analysis. From this standpoint, principles get formulated which are verified by their own findings. No progress is made towards critically breaking down constructive... Hold on a second. Why is this blowing up right now? It's blowing up too much. Let's put you on Do Not Disturb. And I need to shut you off over here. There we go. It gets firmly laid down that the consideration of the self is the primary means of knowing, and that the primary procedure of knowing is analysis. From this standpoint, principles get formulated which are verified by their own findings. No progress is made towards critically breaking down constructive psychology and its assumptions, or towards explaining it and thus refuting it from within. Briefwechsel, page 177. Your disregard for breaking things down critically, that is, for demonstrating their provenance psychologically and carrying this out trenchantly in detail, is connected, in my opinion, with your conception of the theory of knowledge and with the position which you assign, Ziffeisen, to it. Only a theory of knowledge is given the explanation for this inapplicability. The fact of it has been laid down and made plain. It has to render account for the adequacy of scientific methods. It has to provide the grounds for a doctrine of method instead of having its methods taken at a venture, I must say, from particular areas. All right. At bottom, York is demanding a logic that shall stride ahead of the sciences and guide them, as did the logic of Plato and Aristotle. And this demand includes the task of working out positively and radically the different categorical structures of those entities which are nature and of those which are history. York finds that Dilby's investigations put too little stress on differentiation generically between the ontical and the historical. In particular, the procedure of comparison is claimed to be the method for the humane sciences. Here I disagree with you. Comparison is always aesthetic and always adheres to the pattern of things. Windelband assigns, wisst zu, patterns to history. Your concept of the type is an entirely inward one. Here it is a matter of characteristics, not of patterns. For Windelband, history is a series of pictures of individual patterns and aesthetic demand to the natural scientist. These remains beside his science as a kind of human tranquilizer. Only aesthetic enjoyment, but your conception of history is that of a nexus of forces, of unities of force, to which the category of pattern is to be applicable only by a kind of transference. In terms of his sure instinct for differentiating between the ontical and the historical, York knew how strong traditional historical research still remains, itself in purely ocular ways of ascertaining, which are aimed at the corporeal and that which has pattern. Proven science. Are you trying to say proven science? Or provenance? Is that what you're trying to say? Saniko, you say you think the perpetual property slavery was only in the state of the 1600s by the first slave owner, who was also black in the meaning of what we know as slavery. Sure, yeah. Not to mention, yeah, there were Black history. You want to talk about what happened before the Civil War? I'm just gonna say Dane Calloway and leave it at that. All right. Anyway, Pearl knows what I'm talking about. In terms of his sure instinct for differentiating between the ontical and the historical, York knew how strongly traditional historical research still remains, itself in purely ocular ways of ascertaining, which are aimed at the corporeal and at that which has pattern. Rank is a great ocularist for whom things have vanished can never become actualities. Rank, whole tribe, also provides the explanation for the way the material of history has been restricted to the political. Only the political is dramatic. The modifications, which the course of time has brought, appear unessential to me, and I should like to appraise this very differently. For instance, I regard the so-called historical school as a mere side stream within the same riverbed, and as representing only one branch only one branch of an old, thoroughgoing opposition. The name is somewhat deceptive. That school was by no means a historical one, italicized by the author, but an antiquarian one, construing things aesthetically, while the great dominating activity was one of mechanical construction. Hence, what is contributed mythologically to the method of rationality was only a general feeling. The genuine philologus, he conceives of history as a cabinet of antiquities. York is here referring to Carl Friedrich Hermann, whose Geschichte und System der Platonischen Philosophie, Heidelberg, he has been reading. So that sounds like we're talking about Platonism, so there's your Plato right there. So now we're getting to Plato. Where nothing is palpable, whither one has guided only by a living psychical transportation, these gentlemen never come. At heart, they are natural scientists, and they become skeptics all the more because experimentation is lacking. We must keep wholly aloof from all such rubbish, for instance, as how often Plato was in Magna Graecia or Syracuse. On this, nothing vital depends. This superficial affectation, which I have been through critically, winds up at least with a big question mark and is put to shame by the great realities of Homer, Plato, and the New Testament. Right? You know, I mean, like, look, the absurdity is that we want to record every time Jesus took a shit, or whenever, or the nerds are like, how often did they take a shit on the Enterprise, right? It's this thing, right? It's getting down to the nitty gritty because something in history happened there that is important to make me understand why Hitler had to kill all those nice people with the little hats. Right? This is what people are trying to fucking do. Everything that is actually real becomes a mere phantom when one considers it as a thing in itself, when it does not get experienced. These scientists stand over against the powers of the times like the over-refined French society of the Revolutionary period. Now, here's the thing, right? In matters of history, whether somebody wants to record something for the historical record or not, there's somebody in the private sector that wants to publish the details because not everything that everybody was talking about persons and events and places and the subjects of those events, like there's a lot of different people having different conversations of things that actually were done and happened and have had and were built or destroyed or changed. Well, the energy of the weird is what you're extracting your experience of history in your mind upon. Right, and this is the relationship that every seer has with the Norns. These scientists, French, hold on a second. Yeah, okay. Here, as their formalisms, the cult of the form, the defining of relationship is the last word in wisdom. Naturally, thought which runs in the direction has its own history, which I suppose is still unwritten. So that's interesting. So formalism, the cult of the form, the defining of a relationship is the last word in wisdom. That is crazy. Let me take another look. I'm just going to look up formalism. We now have another ism. Rigorous or excessive adherence to recognized forms, as in religion or art. This is hysterical because he's writing this book in Mean Mr. Mustache's country. An instance of rigorous or excessive adherence to recognized forms. A method of aesthetic analysis that emphasizes structural elements and artistic techniques rather than content, especially in literary works. So this is it's almost like a HAOCD, like hyperactive obsessive compulsive disorder. Which would make perfect fucking sense in Nazi Germany, as well as in the most paranoid states of Stalin's Soviet Union, just the Soviet Union. Because what was worse about communism is that it really was this collective way of life that Stalin was sitting on top of as the big boss, right? So, like, you know, it didn't matter if you took out the fucking premier, you know, you still had a fully cohesive whatever. They held their madness down for much longer. Anyway, the groundlessness of such thinking and of any belief in it, and such thinking epistemologically considered, is a metaphysical attitude, is a historical product. It seems to me that the groundswells evoked by the principle of eccentricity presumably the eccentricity of the planetary motions as described by Kepler following on the work of Copernicus. Why is he bringing this up? Okay, so it seems to me that the groundswell is evoked by the principles of eccentricity, which led to a new era more than 400 years ago, have become exceedingly broad and flat, that our knowledge has progressed to the point of canceling itself out, that man has withdrawn so far from himself that he no longer sees himself at all. The modern man, that is to say the post-Renaissance man, is ready for burial. On the other hand, all history that is truly alive and not just reflecting a tinge of life is a critique, but historical knowledge is, for the best part, knowledge of the hidden sources. With history, what makes a spectacle and catches the eye is not the main thing. The nerves are invisible, just as the essentials in general are invisible. While it is said that it is if you were quiet, you would be strong, the variant is also true that if you are quiet, you will perceive that is understood. And then I enjoy the quietude of soliloquizing and communing with the spirit of history. Soliloquizing, I actually do know what it means. It means to do what I do often, which is to kind of go on and on about a thing. You know, like you have a whole nearly poetic spiel that is this overly descriptive, especially on an emotional level, explanation of things. Anyway, this spirit is one who did not appear to Faust in his study, or to Master Goethe either. But they would have felt no alarm in making way for him. However grave and compelling such an apparition might be, for he is brotherly akin to us in another and deeper sense than are the denizens of bush and field. Those exertions are like Jacob's wrestling, a sure gain for the wrestler himself. Indeed, this is what matters first of all. York gained his clear insight into the basic character of history as virtuality from his knowledge of the character of being, which human Dasein itself possesses, not from objective historical study as a theory of science would demand. The entire psychical datum is not one that is. Here, being equals the being present at hand of nature, author's remark, but one that lives. This is the germinal point of historicality. Okay. York's text reads as follows: Das die Gesamt psychologische Gegebenheit nicht ist sonde lebt, ist der Keimpunkt der Geschicklichkeit. Heidegger plausibly changes das to das in the earlier editions to das in the later ones. So capital D-A-S, lowercase d-a-s-s, and then capital D-A-S-S. Okay. And if the consideration of the self is directed not at an abstract I, but at the fullness of myself, it will find me historically determined, just as physics knows me as comically determined. Just as I am nature, so I am history. And York, who saw through all the bogus defining of relationships and groundless relativisms, did not hesitate to draw the final conclusion from his insight into the historicality of Dasein. But on the other hand, in view of the inward historicality of self-consciousness, a systematic that is divorced from history is methodologically inadequate. Just as physiology cannot be studied in abstraction from physics, neither can philosophy from historicality, especially if it is a critical philosophy. Behavior and historicality are like breathing and atmospheric pressure, and this may sound rather paradoxical. It seems to me methodically like a residue from metaphysics, not to historicize one's philosophizing, because to philosophize is to live. There is, in my opinion, do not be alarmed, a philosophy of history, but who would be able to write it? Certainly, it is not the sort of thing it has hitherto been taken to be, or the sort of thing that has been attempted. You have to declare yourself incontrovertible against all that. Up till now, the question has been formulated in a way which is false, even impossible. But this is not the only way of formulating it. Thus, there is no longer any actual philosophizing which would not be historical. The separation between systematic philosophy and historical presentation is essentially incorrect. That a science can become practical is now, of course, the real basis for its justification. But the mathematical praxis is not the only one. The practical aim of our standpoint is one that is pedagogical in the broadest and deepest sense of the word. Such an aim is the soul of all true philosophy, and the truth of Plato and Aristotle. You know my views on the possibility of ethics as a science. In spite of that, this can always be done a little better. For whom are such books really written? Registries about registries. The only thing worthy of notice is what drives them to come from physics to ethics. If philosophy is conceived as a manifestation of life and not as the coughing up of a baseless kind of thinking, and such thinking appears baseless because one's glance gets turned away from the basis of consciousness, then one's task is as meager in its result as it is complicated and arduous in the obtaining of them. Freedom from prejudice is what it presupposes, and such freedom is hard to gain. Okay. All right. I just let the voices argue with each other. All right. Okay, so let me see here. Because I'm getting ready to take another break. Let me see how far down all this go. Oh, wow. I got much further than I thought. But you know what? Even though it's barely 2 pages, I'm gonna take a break anyway, just because I wanna play one more fucking song. I wanna play one more song for you. All right, let's see. Oh yeah, here it is. Okay. Let's see. I know exactly which song I want to fucking ride us out with. Not ride us out, but take us to the next thing. Come on, where is it? Alright, I'm gonna have to type it in. There we go. There it is. Okay, here we go. Gonna be an ad. Almost done. Almost there. Alright. band's effing ridiculous, and they're fucking, they're based. What can I say? They're a pretty based band. Anyway, it is plain for York's allusions to the kind of difficulty met with in such investigations that he himself was already on the way to bringing within our grasp categorically the historical as opposed to the ontical, ocular, and to raising up life into the kind of scientific understanding that is appropriate to it, the aesthetico-mechanistic way of thinking. York is here discussing the Lotz and Fechner and suggesting that their rare talent for expression was abetted by their aesthetico-mechanistic way of thinking. As Heidegger calls it, the reader who is puzzled by the way York lumps together the aesthetic, the mechanistic, and the intuitive should bear in mind that here the words aesthetic and intuitive are used in the familiar Kantian sense of immediate sensory experience, and that York thinks of mechanism as falling entirely within the horizon of such experience without penetrating beyond it. Oh, thank you. Thank you. I forgot. There we go. Gotcha. Finds verbal expression more easily than does an analysis that goes beyond intuitive, and this can be explained by the wide extent to which words have their provenience in the ocular. On the other hand, that which penetrates into the basis of vitality eludes an exoteric presentation. Hence, all its terminology is symbolic and ineluctable, not intelligible at all. I'm going to scroll up for a second, so that way people that, so like you can read. So there you go. Just pause the screen right there. All right, so there you go. Okay. Because philosophical thinking is of a special kind, its linguistic expression has a special character. But you are acquainted with my liking for paradox, which I justify by saying that paradoxicality is a mark of truth, and that the communis opinio is nowhere in the truth, but is like an elemental precipitate of a halfway understanding, which makes generalizations. In its relationship to truth, it is like the sulfurous fumes which the lightning leaves behind. Truth is never an element. To dissolve elemental public opinion, and as far as possible to make possible the molding of individuality in seeing and looking, would be a pedagogical task for the state. Then, instead of a so-called public conscience, instead of this radical externalization, individual consciences, that is to say, consciences, would again become powerful. Right. Okay, so he's saying, so he's acknowledging the power in the individuation process, funny enough, right? So here is your correlation. Like, this is your correlation to how Heidegger and Jung, how their ideas can help each other, right? If one has an interest in understanding historicality, one is brought to the task of working a generic differentiation between the ontical and the historical. The fundamental aim of the philosophy of life is tied up with this nevertheless. The formulation of the question needs to be radicalized in principle. How are we to get historicality into our grasp philosophically as distinguished from the ontical and conceive it categorically, except by bringing both the ontical and the historical into a more primordial unity, so that they can be compared and distinguished. But that is possible only if we attain the following insights: that the question of historicality is an ontological question about the state of being of historical entities. That the question of the ontical is the ontological question of the state of being of entities other than Dasein, of what is present at hand in the widest sense. That the ontical is only one domain of entities. The idea of being embraces both the ontical and the historical. It is this idea which must let itself be generically differentiated. It is not by chance that York calls those entities, which are not historical, simply the ontical. This just reflects the unbroken dominion of the traditional ontology, which, as derived from the ancient way of formulating the question of being, narrows down the ontological problematic in principle and holds it fact. The problem of differentiating between the ontical and the historical cannot be worked out as a problem for research unless we have made sure in advance what is the clue to it by clarifying through fundamental ontology the question of the meaning of being in general. Thus it becomes plain in what sense the preparatory existential temporal analytic of Dasein is resolved to foster the spirit of Count York in the service of Dilthey's work. Lebensphilosophie, the word is italicized only in the later editions. Okay, there we go. I don't know where I missed that. That's it. Next week, or next time, who knows, maybe tomorrow, I don't know. Temporality and within timeness as the source of the ordinary conception of time, which will be part 6. We still got way more to go. Just to give you guys an idea while we're done here, and I've got just enough downtime. Hold on a second. How's this? Wait, nope. There we go. Okay, where are we at? We are 78. Yeah, we're down here, right? So we're going. This is actually the last part, actually. So from here we're going. We got 1, 2, 3, 4. So we got like 6 chapters left, but this should be a lot because we're on page 456. If I click on 83, that brings us down to 486, and then we got to read. Okay, 486. Okay, this is pretty short, right? But here's my point, right? So here we are, this page 488. Let's go back up to the top here. This is page 455, right? So that's a good, that's a lot. But this means that we're nearly done with this series. We're feeling it now. We're in the end game. This is literally the end game. This is the last act of this play. So, we'll figure out how long it takes, because this could be just 2 episodes. I typically, I'll read 2 to 3 chapters. If I can read 3 chapters, 1 episode, 3 chapters the next, we can be done with this in 2 episodes. Yes. The Kalevala was probably one of the last readings I did on my old channel. That is correct. And I believe all of the Kalevala stuff is saved on my Odyssey. I think. I don't know. It's a sad mess of things that were lost. One day I may do some more really straight production work for things and put them maybe even on a channel just for stuff like that. But right now I'm good with just this channel and whatever I do with my music on Zerilath Shreds. Which, by the way, if you like heavy metal music and you want to support me trying to just kind of show off a little bit of my craft while I'm working on real music, you can go over there and check that out. You know, it's me just kind of like noodling, sometimes over a drum track, sometimes just by myself, and putting out some fairly brutal stuff. It was it's a very, there's a lot of feedback involved in how I play, which partially has to do with my equipment and partially has to do with just how much I want the music to sound explosive. There might be some, I don't remember if all the Kalevala is on there, right? These platforms were, I was using the auto upload for that. I don't have time to, to sit there and, like monitor these huge uploads of things that I do. Okay, over by Metamorphosis. Well, Sanika, like, email me. My email is in the description below. Don't be a stranger. And you can follow me on Instagram and Facebook and stuff. Why don't we be more connected and talk, right? Some of you guys, it's totally, at least fucking like, you got Facebook, come fucking hang out on Facebook with me a little bit. You, Instagram, like, whatever. When, if I get somewhere in like so many freaking followers that I don't want to have people in my social media, but like you guys are like the little crowd, and because I really don't have much of a contact with you other than when this is happening, I'm telling you right here, right now. Okay, I am going to play the outro and going to catch you guys later. All right.